I'd like to take a moment to share with you a powerful conversation that I had with a new client. It's my hope that what I shared with her is a help to you the way it was to her. She is 41 years old. She's a single mom of 2 children, recently divorced, and said to me, Doc, I'm coming to you because I'm really trying to figure out how to rebuild my life after so much disappointment and abandonment. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, her husband cheated on her, and he's not in their kids' lives. Her children are 5 and 7. And she said, so that's not a big deal. Her children are doing fine. I'm doing whatever I need to do to make sure that they grow and develop and mature in a healthy way. But it's really probably more about me and my story. I said, what happened? She said, well, I was given up for adoption when I was 1 year old. As a 1-year-old, my parents gave me up for adoption, so I don't even really remember them at all. And fortunately, my grandparents adopted me. She said by the time she was the age of 11, that her grandmother passed away, and it was just her and her grandfather. Her grandfather never remarried. He stayed true to raising her and raised her very hands-on up until she went off to college. And he was present and did everything that he could. And when she got to college, her freshman year, he passed away. And she began to cry on the call. It was a very tough thing to hear. And she said to me that during that period of time, I found myself just really vulnerable and open. And that's when I met my husband, or ex-husband. And we dated off and on, and then eventually ended up getting together in my late 20s. He too was in his late 20s, and we got married and went on and stayed married for just around 10 years or so. She said, so Doc, the thing that I'm having a problem with is that recently, after the divorce, maybe 6 months after the divorce, I started getting on dating apps and meeting people and trying to get to know new people. And it was just a disaster. Right around that time, I also became privy to your information and your content. And a lot of what you explain on your lives about dating apps just not being a great idea, it really resonated with me. So I pulled myself off dating apps. But I'm just in a really big funk right now. And I said, why is it besides these events? Because I understand you've gone through a lot. She said, well, I've gone through a lot. She said, but I'm in a little funk because I got off the dating apps. I've really been working on the 5 years of healing and pouring back into myself. And I've met a gentleman, and I didn't meet him on a dating app. He was actually introduced to me through a mutual friend, a coworker, and a great guy. He seems to check all the boxes, but I told him I was not interested, that I just didn't want to engage with him. I said, well, why did you say that? She said, well, if I'm being honest, I didn't want to be abandoned again. She said, Doc, I'm lonely and I really want companionship and I desire companionship, but my heart can't take being abandoned again. And she started to cry, very upset. She said, I just don't know of anyone who has ever been left more than me. And these feelings of abandonment, I can't shake them. And I, as nice as the guy is, I just did not want to set myself up to be abandoned again. I said, ma'am, I understand your frame of thinking, and I certainly respect it. And while it is true and it has truth to it, the reality is you don't need to date him because you're not ready to date him. That's number one. Your divorce hasn't been a full year, and you need time to heal clearly because of this very obvious abandonment wound that you have, and rightfully so, that started all the way back when you were 1 year old and all the way through a large part of your early life. I understand that. I said, but I want to talk to you about how to defeat abandonment. And I want to talk to you about that. But before I do, let's just make sure we're clear on the difference between being lonely and alone. I said, do you know the difference? She said, I don't. I'm sure there is one, but I feel like people use the words interchangeably. I said, they do. Being lonely and being alone is not the same. When a person is alone, they are alone in a spatial sense, meaning there's nothing around them. So the word alone really speaks to your physical locality and what's around you in your environment. Was on a call at that time and in the home by myself. My children were at school. I said, right now I'm in my house alone. There's nobody here. But being lonely really refers to a lack that exists mentally and emotionally and perhaps even spiritually in your life. When we think about a person who says, I'm lonely, It's more than just a spatial awareness. It actually speaks to a lacking mentally and emotionally, and perhaps again spiritually, that person is having, that person possesses, that causes them to feel like they are lonely. Loneliness, I said to her, is internal. Being alone is external. When a person says they are lonely, but they're referring to what's going on outside of them, i.e. they're being abandoned, they're being left in a physical sense, they're referring to the word alone. But the real problem is what they feel inside. I said, does that make sense? She says it does. She said it did. I said, when we understand the difference between the two, then we can also create then a difference or a clearer understanding of what it means to be abandoned. Because then when we are abandoned, being abandoned can be a combination of both being lonely and alone. That when a person abandons you, they have left your physical space, but they've also left your mental and emotional space. They've challenged you mentally and emotionally to feel a sense of lack or loss. And so it's typically a combination of both. And something else is also true. I said a person can be in your vicinity and you still feel alone. She said, Doc, isn't that contradictory? I said, it sounds like it, because I said aloneness really only speaks to spatial awareness. But have you ever heard of people being in a crowd but feeling like they're by themselves? She said, I have. I said, that's a perfect example of how you can be around people, but because you are mentally and emotionally disconnected from your surroundings, you feel both lonely, but also alone, not spatially alone. She said, Doc, this is spot on. I said, so this is how we defeat abandonment. I said, there are two things I want you to think about. Number one, when we consider what abandonment is and how that occurs, and even think about your life gives us clues on how to defeat it. First, you got to understand what you can control. When it comes to abandonment, people really get caught up on things they can't control. I said, man, think about the events of your life. Could you control your parents giving you up for adoption at 1? She said, no, sir. I said, could you control your grandparents adopting you? She said, no, sir. I said, could you control your grandmother passing at the age of 11? She said, no, sir. I said, could you control the unfortunate passing of what you call your best friend, your grandfather, at the age of 19? She said, I could not. I said, ma'am, you're saying that you were abandoned, but everything that you have named is the result of things that what? She said, I can't control. I said, so perfect. When we understand abandonment in the context of what you can control, it helps us to see that sometimes abandonment is not about what people have necessarily done to us. It's not about the things that we've done to ourselves, for sure, but oftentimes it's about things that either people nor ourselves can control. And when you start calling situations that you can't control abandonment, you give abandonment a special power that doesn't belong to it. She was like, wow, Doc, that's profound. And then it leads me to number 2. I said, so then if that's the case, the second thing that we do to defeat abandonment is that we've got to redefine our beliefs about what has occurred so we can build better thoughts and emotions about it. I said, man, when you recognize that you could not control being given up for adoption, you could not control the untimely passing of people in your family that you are near and dear to, then you recognize that you can build different beliefs around those situations. It's not that mom and dad didn't want you. They maybe didn't. We don't know. You don't know. But the new belief you can build around that is, I can't control that mom and dad gave me up for adoption. I was only 1 years old, and I don't even remember the incident. But one thing that I can determine is being given up by adoption and having all of these other life transitions by my caregivers, but still being able to graduate from college and become a model woman and a model mother to my children has caused me to build a resilience that most people will never experience. I said, ma'am, that's called reframing your beliefs around these incidents so that you can see abandonment in a much better way. Does that make sense? She's wiping her tears. She's crying, but she's writing profusely. She said, Doc, this is helping a lot. I said, we've got to rebuild those beliefs around abandonment and what this means so we can have better thoughts and emotions, because when you create those thoughts, then your emotions about the situation, while it may not happen overnight, eventually is going to feel better in time. I said, ma'am, I want you to consider something finally. I said, have you ever heard of abandoned carts? Have you ever gone shopping online? She said, I have. I said, have you ever abandoned a cart online, put some things in the virtual cart, but then didn't check it out? She said, I have. I said, when you do that, what do you get in your email for most corporations? She said, a message from them. I said, what does it say? She said, it'll say, well, you left your cart empty, and it'll give you a link that you can click on it to finish your purchase. I said, have you ever done that? She said, I have. I said, when you click on the link, what happens when you get on the page? She said, it allows you to complete the purchase. I said, I've had those too. And then also they'll say as an incentive, if you complete your purchase, we'll knock 10% off your order, right? She said, yeah. I said, ma'am, what is the store's response to you abandoning your cart? She thought about it. She said, I guess to send me an email. I said, more than that, what is it? She said, to finish the transaction. I said, ma'am, the store's response to you abandoning the cart is to give you an opportunity to complete the purchase. And what people don't realize is that when you abandon a cart, you never see the store send an email. I can't believe you. The audacity of you to abandon your cart and not get those items out. The audacity of you to visit our site and spend 30 minutes on our site and then put 10 things in your cart and not check it out. How dare you? Don't come back and shop here again. She started laughing. I said, ma'am, that's how we act when people abandon us. We create these stories that are so negative, that are grounded in so many negative beliefs, that it impacts our thoughts, ruins our emotions, and destroys our behaviors. I said, but most companies, when you abandon their cart, they'll send you a joke. I get emails from companies that say, psst, you left something. Here's 10% to go get it, right? It's real light. Why? Because they don't view abandonment as something negative. They view abandonment as an opportunity to create a purchase and gain a new customer. I said, ma'am, that's how we defeat abandonment. You defeat abandonment by understanding what you can control and then creating new beliefs around it. You don't continue to view abandonment as something that happened to you, but you start to view abandonment as something that happened through you that created an opportunity for you. She was very thankful. We've been doing some work on redefining her beliefs. She's making great progress and doing incredibly well, and says, Doc, I'm even open to perhaps once I heal, reaching out to that guy to consider maybe dating and seeing what can happen in the future. I hope this story made sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zeb. Listen, I've been dying to make this announcement for a very long time now, and I'm pleased to say that Inspire Nation has officially launched. Yes, we finally got a Facebook and YouTube community group where we're going to have exclusive content, exclusive shorts, exclusive discussion prompts, where we're going to engage with other people literally around the world who are on the same healing journey that we're on. I need you to go find these pages right now on Facebook and YouTube. Inspire Nation, follow the page, join the group, introduce yourself, and be prepared to link up with literally thousands of people around the world who are on the same healing journey, who are looking for the same resources, and who want to also be surrounded with other like-minded individuals who are growing in the same direction as you are. I'm so excited about this because it's the beginning of some great things I can't talk about right now. Listen, you got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you.